Luke chapter 2, starting with verse 1. I'm going to read a few verses here, starting with verse 1 in chapter 2 of Luke. And it came to pass in those days that a decree went out from Caesar Augustus that all the world should be registered. This census first took place while Quirinius was governing Syria. So all went to be registered, every one to his own city. Joseph also went up from Galilee out of the city of Nazareth into Judea to the children of David, which is called Bethlehem, because he was of the house and lineage of David, to be registered with Mary his betrothed wife, who was with child. So it was that while they were there, the days were completed for her to be delivered. And she brought forth her firstborn son and wrapped him in swaddling clothes and laid him in a manger, because there was no room for them in the inn. Now there were in the same country shepherds living out in the fields, keeping watch over their flock by night. And behold, an angel of the Lord stood before them, and the glory of the Lord shone around them, and they were greatly afraid. Then the angel said to them, "Do not be afraid, for behold, I bring you good tidings of great joy, which will be to all people. For there is born to you this day in the city of David a Savior, who is Christ the Lord. And this will be the sign to you. You will find a babe wrapped in swaddling clothes, laid in a manger." 2,000 years ago, the Roman Empire was at or near the pinnacle of power. And they controlled most of what was considered the civilized world at that time. If civilized is what you want to call it. The empire reached from Rome out east all the way to the Atlantic Ocean, north all the way into the British Isles, most of all of Western Europe, a good bit of Eastern Europe, most all of Eurasia, east all the way into Iran, and then south all the way into North Africa. It was a considerable chunk of land. In the midst of this land was Israel. The Romans called the land the province of Palestine. Judea. I'm sorry. They called it province of Judea. Now, they allowed Israel an appointed king. I say an appointed king. In other words, he really wasn't the deserved king, but they allowed them their own little, sort of like, you can have your government as long as you obey our government's demands or requirements. Basically, they were a police state controlled by the Romans. Israel had pretty much been in this situation since the captivity back during the when the Babylonians first captured them. They were removed from the land for 70 years. They come back to the land. They had been there since then for close to 600 years, but in all that time, they really never were a sovereign nation. They were always under a controlling world empire, and there was 4 of them, and we will talk about them later on. To make matters worse, the priest had perverted God's law. They had not heard from God in over 400 years. No word from God, meaning no prophet had come with renewed revelation from God. Now, after 400 years of no word from God, they were pretty much in spiritual darkness as well as political darkness. Yet there was a light of hope. A promised one would come. A deliverer, the Messiah. This had been spoken of for years. But after 600 years of captivity and 400 years no word from God, it seemed like God had forgotten his promise. And no deliverer would ever come. In Judea, south of Jerusalem, there was a small town, Bethlehem. It was a very small town. It was a very seemingly insignificant town, except for one thing. It did have one claim to fame. What was that?
The prophecy that it would
Well, no, actually not that.
It's David City.
City of David. This is where King David was born. And yes, Chad's right. There was a prophecy also, but I think that prophecy got overlooked a lot of times. You know what I mean? We'll talk about that in just a minute. It was David's hometown. Now, Fort Worth, Texas, today has a nickname. Anybody know what it is? Come on, y'all. Cowtown. Cowtown. Fort Worth has these large stockyards there right in the middle of town. You go through on the interstates and you look right down into the stockyards. Every week, thousands of cattle are sold in those stockyards, so they call it Cowtown. Bethlehem, we could call it Sheeptown. Bethlehem set in sheep country, and all around it was hills that was suitable for grazing sheep. And they grazed a lot of sheep there. What was David before he became king? He was a sheep herder. They had been herding sheep there for many, 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 many years. And they were still herding sheep there. One night, the shepherds are out in the fields. They're keeping watch over their flocks. They're tending to their sheep, as they did every night. And something spectacular happened. An angel appeared to them. And the angel made an announcement. For there is born to you this day in the city of David a Savior who is Christ the Lord, also translated Messiah. Basically, the angel come and told them, the Messiah is here. The long-awaited one is here. He is come. 1,500 years after they left Egypt, entered the land of Israel, been waiting on this new deliverer. He's finally here. And who's the announcement made to? Common folk. Common folk. Throughout the Old Testament scriptures, this was prophesied. Now, some of these prophecies are pretty clear. Some would not become clear until he actually fulfilled them. And we should take heed of that. Did y'all hear what I just said? Some of these prophecies were quite clear. But some of these prophecies they did not understand till he fulfilled them. We should take heed of this. Some were not even recognized as prophecies. Others were just difficult to understand. The very first prophecy concerning this coming one goes all the way back to Genesis chapter 3, the Garden of Eden. Y'all all know what it is. I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your seed and her seed. This is a Messianic prophecy. The Messiah would be born to a woman. No big deal. Who in here wasn't born to a woman? Well, it becomes a big deal when we're told that the woman would be a virgin. Isaiah 7:14. Therefore the Lord himself will give you a sign. Behold, the virgin shall conceive and bear a son, and shall call him Emmanuel. This was fulfilled that night in Bethlehem, because Mary was a virgin. And yes, it was even prophesied, as Chad said, that he would be born in Bethlehem. In Micah chapter 5 and verse 2, it says, But you, Bethlehem, though you are little among thousands of Judah, yet out of you shall come forth to me the one to be the ruler in Israel, whose goings forth are from of old, from everlasting. Puts little old Bethlehem up on a pretty high pedestal. You know what I'm saying? King David come from here, and there's one greater than David that's coming. One from old, from everlasting. And there's many prophecies like these. For instance, it was told what tribe he would come from, Judah. It was told what family, David's. And not all prophecies were about his birth. Some were about his ministry. Zechariah 9:9 says, Rejoice greatly, O daughter of Zion. Shout, O daughter of Jerusalem. Behold, your king is coming to you. He is just and having salvation. Now we can stop right there. That tells us what his ministry is. What? To bring salvation. Okay? Now I had said earlier, sometimes they didn't understand these prophecies till you fulfill them. How do you think Israel interpreted that prophecy? He will bring salvation.
Release from Rome.
Deliverance.
Yeah. How do we interpret that? To bring spiritual salvation. Now, like I said, we could stop there with that prophecy about his ministry, but it goes on. It says, he is just and having salvation, lowly, listen to this, riding on a donkey, a foal of a donkey. That was a prophecy of him entering Jerusalem, riding on a new colt, the Sunday before his crucifixion. Prophesied in the Old Testament. You say, that'd be easy for a man to do. He could read the prophecy, go get a donkey and just ride it in. Well, yeah, okay, maybe so. But what about all these other things? I mean, stay with me here. And there were many other prophecies that did not paint such a glorious picture of Jesus. Prophecies that they didn't understand or they didn't recognize as prophecies. They foretold of something Israel didn't want to consider when it came to their deliverer, their Messiah. Things that they didn't even want to hear. Some things that disturbed them greatly. Look at Isaiah chapter 53 with me. Starting in verse 1. I hope this is a prophecy you're all very familiar with. I'm sure you are. And it's a very complicated prophecy when we get right down to it. It says, Isaiah 53 verse 1. Who has believed our report, and to whom has the arm of the Lord been revealed? For he shall grow up before him as a tender plant, and as a root out of dry ground. He has no form or comeliness, and when we see him, there is no beauty that we should desire him. He is despised and rejected by men, a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief, and we hid as it were our faces from him. He was despised, and we did not esteem him. Surely he has borne our griefs and carried our sorrows. Yet we esteemed him stricken, smitten by God, and afflicted. But he was wounded for our transgressions. He was bruised for our iniquities. The chastisement of our peace, for our peace, was upon him. And by his stripes we are healed. All we like sheep have gone astray. We have turned every one to his own way, and the Lord has laid on him the iniquity of us all. He was oppressed and he was afflicted, yet he opened not his mouth. He was led as a lamb to the slaughter, and as a sheep before its shears is silent, so he opened not his mouth. He was taken from prison and from judgment, and who will declare his generation? For he was cut off from the land of the living. For the transgressions of my people he was stricken, and they made his grave with the wicked, but with the rich at his death, because he had done no violence, nor was any deceit in his mouth. Yet it pleased the Lord to bruise him. He has put him to grief. When you make his soul an offering for sin, he shall see his seed, he shall prolong his days, and the pleasure of the Lord shall prosper in his hand. He shall see the labor of his soul and be satisfied by his knowledge. My righteous servant shall justify many, for he shall bear their iniquities. Therefore I will divide him a portion with the great, and he shall divide the spoil with the strong, because he poured out his soul unto death, and he was numbered with the transgressors. He bore the sin of many and made transgression for the transgressors. Now, Israel, the Jews, probably didn't know what to do with that. We do, though, don't we? This is what I meant. Some of the prophecies were not clearly understood until the fulfillment of the prophecy. We look back on this prophecy being fulfilled. Think about it. If we didn't know the whole story, do you think you would understand this? This prophecy describes what kind of man the Messiah would be. A common man. It says he has no form or comeliness. It says, and when we see him, there is no beauty that we should desire him. A man of sorrows and grief. This isn't what Israel wanted in their Messiah. This wasn't what they were looking for in their coming king. They wanted a strong warrior king to deliver them from Roman captivity. That's what they was looking for. That wasn't what Jesus was coming for, though, was it? Isaiah 53 also tells us how he would be received. How was he received by the Jews? He is despised and rejected by men. So not only the Jews, but all men despised and rejected him. They would hide their faces from him. That means that they would be embarrassed about him. They would be embarrassed to call this man their Messiah. He wasn't what they wanted.
It's true. It's still true today.
It's still true today. Very true today. It also tells us how they would treat him. He was oppressed and he was afflicted. He was stricken and eventually they would kill him. For he was cut off from the land of the living, is what it says. The Jews rejected this prophecy as being messianic. They explained it as a prophecy of the tragedies of the nation of Israel through their history, is how they explained this prophecy.
Do you know the history? They still today?
Yes, yes, they do, Glenn.
Obviously, they have to.
And yes, I did look that up. I asked the same question. And yes, they do consider that the
History of it.
yeah, they explain that as the explanation for this prophecy, the interpretation of this prophecy even today. They were not then or now willing to apply this prophecy to the Messiah, is what I got wrote down here.
And it's crazy because it's so specific, even pierced for their iniquities, this.
Yeah, but Chad, you're reading.
I'm talking about now, before.
Now, right,
Now, then
right.
looking back, it's pretty specific
Right.
that it was Jesus.
Oh,
that
yeah,
was denied.
yeah.
Well, but they would
Yeah.
have to accept him
That's right.
for that to be the case.
Yeah. Now, so depending on who you talk to, and what I mean by who you talk to, by what theologian you study, there's somewhere between 450 and 550 prophecies of the Messiah in the Bible. Now, you get down into what's a prophecy and what's not a prophecy, and I don't want to go there today because here's why there's such a variance, though. I'll give you one example. So some people will say Joseph himself is a prophecy of the Messiah. Now, Joseph was a likeness of the Messiah. So I guess technically, yes, he is a prophecy of the Messiah. And some people say, no, he was just a likeness, but you can't say he's a prophecy because it wasn't really written down as him. So there's where you know, depending on how different people look at it. So anyway, we're looking at 500 prophecies in the Bible of the Messiah. We'll just split the difference between 450 and 500. 550. Jesus, we do know this. Jesus himself, when he was alive here on earth, it's from everything I'm reading, they're counting 300 prophecies that he fulfilled about the Messiah. Questions?
He's going to come back to fulfill the rest.
Only 300? What about the other 200? What happened to them? Well, let's take a look at some of them. since we're in Isaiah, turn to Isaiah chapter 9. Isaiah chapter 9, starting with verse 6. For unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given, and the government will be upon his shoulder. And his name shall be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. Of the increase of his government and peace there will be no end, upon the throne of David and over his kingdom, to order it and establish it with judgment and justice from that time forward, even forever. The zeal of the Lord of hosts will perform this. Now,
Yet to come.
whoa, I hear you. But when do we read this, for unto us a child is born? When you heard those words, what was the first thing you thought about? Christmas. Right? After all, it's talking about the birth of the Savior here. The coming Messiah, it says a child will be born, a son will be given, and the government will be upon his shoulder. What's that telling us?
You gonna rule the world?
He would be a political leader. He would be a political leader. And it says of the increase of his government and peace, there will be no end. Not only would he be a political leader, he would be a political leader of the whole world, as Will just said. Because there would be no end to it. Basically, the Roman Empire was considered political leader of the whole world at that time. I know they didn't come into North America, South America, China. I realize that. And there were people there at that time. But for these people in this area, they considered the Romans the leaders of the world. So what they're saying is, all right, this Messiah that's coming, he's going to take over from the Romans. He's going to become the leader of the world. The whole world. And it says he will be a king in Israel, upon the throne of David and over his kingdom. Where's the throne of David? Jerusalem. Where's the kingdom of David? Israel. So that's telling us the Messiah would rule from the throne of David in Jerusalem in the land of Israel, and Israel under his leadership would be rulers of the whole world. So Israel's thinking, okay, we got this guy coming, this deliverer coming, he's going to take over. The Romans are out, we're in. We're going to be the rulers of the world. That's what they're thinking. This is what they wanted. This is what they were looking for. I know, I understand. When we talk about Jesus Christ, the Son of God, and we talk about his position, what positions does he hold? Prophet, priest, and king. I understand that. When my opinion on this is, and y'all may vary with me on this, when Jesus Christ was here on earth during his ministry, at his baptism, what happened? You know the story. The Holy Spirit descended upon him. That began his ministry. I believe his ministry was as a prophet. Now, if you go back and compare the Old Testament prophets and what they did, and look at what Jesus did, he did what they did. He brought forth a word of warning. He called for repentance. He did miracles. Yes, the Old Testament prophets did miracles. He made prophecies of what would come to happen. He had the role of a prophet. He was also a priest. Now, I think Jesus took over as priest. Now, he could be a prophet and a priest at the same time. I understand that. But I think he really took over his priesthood at a particular moment in time. Anybody want to take a shot at when that might have been?
His death, or his
You're close.
resurrection?
No, you're going the wrong direction. You're going the wrong direction, Chad. Look, Last Supper. Last Supper. At the Last Supper, he took over as priest. High priest. Now, think about this a minute. What's he about to do?
Sacrifice.
Make a sacrifice. Who makes the sacrifice? The high priest. He's about to make a sacrifice for the people as high priest. Only this time the high priest is sacrificing himself. That night at the Lord's Supper, what happened? They ate 2 meals that night. They sat down and took the Passover. What's the Passover? Old Testament. When they finished the Passover meal, he broke bread and served them again. What is this? Lord's Supper, New Testament. He is taking the position of high priest at this point. When he administered that Lord's Supper, as we call it, that night, he instituted that Lord's Supper that night. That was him taking position as priest. Okay, so we have Jesus as prophet. We have Jesus as priest. When was Jesus king of Israel?
When he comes back.
He wasn't, was he? He didn't become the king of Israel. Look at John chapter 18. Some of you may be questioning me on this. John chapter 18. Jesus is on trial. He's before Pontius Pilate right now. And they're having a dialogue. Look at verse 18, verse 33. We're going to read quite a lengthy passage here. It says, Then Pilate entered the praetorium again, called Jesus and said to him, Are you the king of the Jews? Okay, stop just a minute. So this is what we're discussing. Was Jesus king? And Pontius Pilate just asked him our question for us, didn't he?
I'll say he's born king.
He was born king. He was king before he was born.
Yes. True.
But was he ever king of Israel? Was he the king of the Jews? That's the question. To be the king of the Jews on David's throne means he would have had to went to Jerusalem, went into the palace, and sat on the throne and ruled as king of Israel. Did he do that?
No.
Pontius Pilate asked him, Are you the king of the Jews? Jesus answered him, Are you speaking for yourself about this, or did others tell you this concerning me? Because this was charged that the Sanhedrin had brought against him. Pilate answered, Am I a Jew? Your own nation and the chief priests have delivered you to me. What have you done? Jesus answered, My kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, my servants would fight, so that I should not be delivered to the Jews. But now my kingdom is not from here. Now what did he just tell Pontius Pilate? I'm not king of the Jews. That's what he just said. Not my words, his. Pilate therefore said to him, Are you a king then? Jesus answered, You say rightly that I am a king. For this cause I was born, and for this cause I have come into the world, that I should bear witness to the truth. Everyone who is of the truth hears my voice. So what did he just say? Yes, I am a king, but I'm not king of the Jews. What did Isaiah's prophecy say? He would rule from David's throne. Pilate said to him, What is truth? And when he had said this, he went out again to the Jews and said to them, I find no fault in him at all, but you have a custom that I should release someone to you at the Passover. Do you therefore want me to release to you the king of the Jews? Then they all cried, saying, Not this man, but Barabbas. Now Barabbas was a robber. So then Pilate took Jesus and scourged him, and the soldiers twisted a crown of thorns and put it on his head, and they put on him a purple robe. Then they said, Hail, King of the Jews! And they struck him with their hands. Who said, Hail, King of the Jews? The Roman soldiers, not the Jews. They were mocking him. Pilate then went out again and said to them, Behold, I am bringing him out to you, that you may know that I will find no fault in him. Then Jesus came out, wearing the crown of thorns and the purple robe, and Pilate said to them, Behold the man. Therefore, when the chief priest and officers saw him, they cried out, saying, Crucify him, crucify him. Pilate said to them, You take him and crucify him, for I find no fault in him. The Jews answered him, We have a law, and according to our law he ought to die, because he made himself the Son of God. Therefore, when Pilate heard that saying, he was the more afraid, and went again into the praetorium, and said to Jesus, Where are you from? But Jesus gave him no answer. Then Pilate said, Are you not speaking to me? Do you not know that I have power to crucify you and power to release you? Jesus answered, You could have no power at all against me unless it had been given you from above. Therefore, the one who delivered me to you has the greater sin. From then on, Pilate sought to release him. But the Jews cried out, saying, If you let this man go, you are not Caesar's friend. Whoever makes himself a king speaks against Caesar. What did they just accuse him of? Making himself a king. Did Jesus ever claim to be the king of the Jews? This was a lie. Trumped up charges. When Pilate therefore heard that saying, he brought Jesus out and sat down in the judgment seat in the place that is called the Pavement, but in Hebrew, Gabbatha. Now it was the preparation day of the Passover, and about the 6th hour. And he said to the Jews, Behold, your king. Listen to this. But they cried out, Away with him, crucify him. Pilate said to them, Shall I crucify your king? The chief priests answered, We have no king but Caesar. Then they delivered him to be crucified. So they took Jesus and led him away. And he, bearing his cross, went out to a place called the Place of a Skull, which is called in Hebrew Golgotha, where they crucified him and 2 others with him, one on either side, and Jesus in the center. Now Pilate didn't like these Jews, by the way. He particularly didn't like these high priests and this Sanhedrin that he had to deal with all the time. So look what Pilate does. Pilate wrote a title and put it on the cross, and the writing was, Jesus of Nazareth, the King of the Jews. Then many of the Jews read this title from the place where Jesus was crucified, was near the city, and it was written in Hebrew, Greek, and Latin. Therefore the chief priest of the Jews said to Pilate, Do not write the King of the Jews. But he said, I am the King of the Jews. Pilate answered, What I have written, I have written. Jesus never made that claim while he was here on earth. My point is, Jesus was never king of Israel. But Isaiah said he would be.
And so Pilate here believed that he wasn't the king of the Jews too, correct?
Pilate knew he wasn't king of the Jews. Pilate knew Caesar was king over all. Does that mean he wasn't a king? No, Jesus told Pilate, I am a king. I'm not king of Israel.
And Pilate got scared too that he,
Yeah.
he wasn't.
So what happened? Did Isaiah miss his? I only see 2 options here. Either these were not messianic prophecies that Isaiah gave us, or Isaiah was wrong. Now I reject both of those.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
I don't accept either one. So we're only left with one alternative. They're messianic prophecies, but they have a different meaning to them. So what's going on? Fortunately, we don't have to wonder about that because Jesus told us what was going on. So turn over to John 13. And by the way, that king of the Jews, that's just one example of a lot of prophecies that Jesus didn't fulfill in his life, in his ministry here on earth. So we're talking about all these prophecies, these 200 plus other prophecies that were not fulfilled at his first coming. In John chapter 13, Jesus' disciples are they're upstairs doing the Lord's Supper that I was talking about earlier. And they eat the Passover meal together. Then Jesus institutes the Lord's Supper with them. And now he's telling them things that are about to happen. He's telling them some things that they don't like what he's saying. Starting with verse 21. When Jesus had said these things, he was troubled in spirit and testified and said, "Most assuredly I say to you, one of you will betray me." Then the disciples looked at one another, perplexed about whom he spoke. Now there was leaning on Jesus' bosom one of his disciples whom Jesus loved. This was John. And Simon Peter therefore motioned to him to ask who it was of whom he spoke. Then leaning back on Jesus' breast, he said to him, "Lord, who is it?" Jesus answered, "It is he to whom I shall give a piece of bread when I have dipped it." And having dipped the bread, he gave it to Judas Iscariot, the son of Simon. Now after the piece of bread, Satan entered him. Then Jesus said to him, "What you do quickly." But no one at the table knew for what reason he said this to him. For some thought because Judas had the money box that Jesus had said to him, "Buy those things we need for the feast," or that he should give something to the poor. Having received the piece of bread, he then went out immediately, and it was night. So Judas is gone. So when he had gone out, Jesus said, "Now the Son of Man is glorified, and God is glorified in him. If God is glorified in him, God will also glorify him in himself, and glorify him immediately. Little children, I shall be with you a little while longer. You will seek me, and as I said to the Jews, where I am going, you cannot come. So now I say to you, a new commandment I give you, that you love one another as I have loved you, that you also love one another. By this, all will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another." Simon Peter said to him, "Lord, where are you going?" And Jesus answered him, "Where I am going, you cannot follow me now, but you shall follow me afterwards." Peter said to him, "Lord, can I not follow you now? I will lay down my life for your sake." Jesus answered him, "Will you lay down your life for my sake? Most assuredly I say to you, the rooster shall not crow till you have denied me 3 times. There was something different that night. It says Jesus was spiritually troubled. The disciples sensed this. They were also troubled. He tells them that one of them's going to betray him. He tells them that Peter's going to deny him. And he's talking about going away. He's told them this several times. He has told them in the past that he's going to die. Now, either they didn't understand what he was telling them, or they denied what he was telling them. But they did not accept it. In verse 36, Peter asked where he is going, and Jesus answered him, "Where I am going, you cannot follow me now, but you shall follow me afterwards." I believe he's talking about death here. I'm going to die. And you can't die with me now, but you will die later. And as a matter of fact, we're told by tradition that Peter was also crucified. I don't know if he was or not. But anyway, it doesn't matter. Peter would die. I think Peter understood this as well, because after Jesus told him this, Peter says, "Lord, why can I not follow you now? I will lay down my life for you." I think he understood. We're talking about death here, because he said, "I'm willing to die." They all felt that way, because if you go back earlier, before they ever come to Jerusalem, they didn't want him to go because they knew what was going on. They knew the Sanhedrin was trying to kill him. And they feared if he went back to Jerusalem, he would die. And they begged him not to go, but he told them I'm going anyway. And at that time, Thomas told him, he says, let us go that we may die with him. They were all saying the same thing Peter said. They were willing to die also. They know what he's talking about. They know he's talking about dying. Yes, they're troubled. They're very troubled. You may be wondering, what's this got to do with second coming? I've talked more about Christmas here. What's this got to do with second coming? It has everything to do with it. Everything to do with it. Look what Jesus tells them in the first 4 verses of 14. Let not your heart be troubled. You believe in God, believe also in me. In my Father's house are many mansions. If it were not so, I would have told you. I go to prepare a place for you. And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and receive you to myself, that where I am, there you may be also. And where I go, you know, and the way you know. He tells them not to have troubled hearts, to have faith. Everything's going to be all right. He tells them where he's going, to his Father's house. He tells them why he's going, to prepare a place. And then he tells them the most important thing and the best thing of all. I'm coming again. I'm coming again. A second coming. That explains everything. Those prophecies that weren't fulfilled when he came 2,000 years ago will be fulfilled when he comes again. Those prophecies that the Israel didn't understand, that Israel rejected and still reject today, will be explained. It's all going to come about. He will take David's throne. He will set up his own government. Here's the thing though. The Jews didn't realize all this, but we do. Why? How? We got more information than they had, right? He fulfilled a lot of the prophecies, which opened up meaning to other prophecies. He gave us additional prophecy, I'm coming again, and we have the rest of the New Testament that also tells us a whole lot about the second coming and what's going to happen at that time. So that's why we understand it better than they do. I've said this before. This is going to stun you, and you're going to say, stoning. I probably, and I'm not bragging about this, don't misunderstand me here. You too. You probably have a better understanding of some of these prophecies than the prophets that wrote them did.
Well, it tells us in there the prophets studied what they wrote to try to figure out the meaning.
Exactly. So we really have a better understanding of his comings than they did before he came the first time. But I said earlier, we should take heed. If they misunderstood some prophecies, we could too. Today we're living in a very troubled time in the world. Anybody disagree with that? Let not your heart be troubled, because Jesus is coming again. And this is what we're going to be studying for the next couple of months. And we're going to get pretty deep into it. So buckle up, get ready for the ride, because I'm going to get detailed on the second coming of Christ. All right, let's go.